This is a video that I've wanted to do since the very beginning of my channel, and today I'm going to be ranking the entire Arkham series. Now, not just the 4 base games, but also their story DLC, the spin-off titles such as Arkham VR and Arkham Origins Blackgate. I'm not going to be ranking the comics in this list just because I feel that some of those aren't really canon. Some of them have been retconned. Similarly, I'm not going to be putting Assault on Arkham in this list, but all of the playable content that you can download and play on a console or your PC will be included in this list. So let's start it off at my least favorite and we'll work my way up to my favorite. So first up is Arkham VR. And I do think that Arkham VR was a valiant and noble experiment in bringing Batman to virtual reality technology, but I feel that all that was really proven in this experiment was that the technology really wasn't there to bring Batman to a compelling virtual reality experience. I think Arkham VR has some interesting ideas, but it lacks any sort of combat or traversal, which is what you really want to be doing when you're playing as Batman. It has some fun detective elements, but those start to lose their freshness when you realize that there's really nothing else you can do in the game. It's very scripted, very linear, and it didn't really make me feel like Batman. With that being said, it was cool to look over Gotham City in virtual reality. Next up, I have the Initiation DLC from Batman Arkham Origins. This, to me, was just disappointing because it barely qualifies for this list, but it should have been one of the best pieces of Batman content for this series. Initiation shows us the training days of Bruce Wayne. When he was trained to become Batman, he's up in the mountains of Korea, and all it really is challenge maps strung together with story cutscenes. They have Shiva in there, but she doesn't have a speaking role. Bruce Wayne doesn't speak. So there's not really any story to speak of. You just go from room to room beating up ninjas that are just reskinned thugs from the game, and it's all fine. I understand that it is what it is, but I just wish that there had been more to it. Perhaps there could have been a bit of a small open world to explore here. There could have been a little bit more to the story, a little bit more in terms of Bruce Wayne's characterization. I just felt that for such a high concept idea and for such a pivotal, important part of Batman's story, this was just very, very underwhelming. So next up, I have all the Arkham episodes except for the Batgirl A Matter of Family. That is something that I'm going to put on a different tier of this list. So in this tier, I'm putting Robin, Catwoman, Harley Quinn, Red Hood, and of course Nightwing. All of those Arkham episodes, they're each too short. They all have really well-designed environments and interesting ideas and cool villains that we didn't get to see tons of in the game, so it was fun to see a little bit more of them. But when I say we only saw a little bit more of them, I am being very accurate. Each of these is 10 to 15 minutes long, 20 if you're really pushing it, and there isn't tons of story or characterization here. This feels like the bare minimum, and I feel like perhaps Rocksteady was stretching themselves a little bit too thin with the story DLC of Arkham Knight, and perhaps should have focused on giving one character really strong DLC, or adding a little bit more to Seasons of Infamy, as I feel that that was the strongest piece of DLC for Arkham Knight. So I do appreciate that we get a little bit of variety in playing as some of these Bat Family characters, but their Arkham episodes just aren't long enough to really give us enough time to flesh them out in terms of characterization or the gameplay loop, or to see how they play differently from Batman. So again, I was just disappointed and underwhelmed by these. They all take place after Arkham Knight as well, and so to not really see them flesh out how these characters are feeling after Bruce Wayne's disappearance, they hint at it a bit but don't really show it. Again, just underwhelming is the only word that comes to mind. Next up, I have Arkham Origins Blackgate. So this is the handheld spin-off to the Arkham series. It retains a lot of the stylistic choices of Batman Arkham Origins, as it was a spin-off for that game. And Arkham Origins Blackgate is where we start getting into the tier of, I don't think that it was bad at all, but I also didn't really think that it was anything to write home about. And it's fine. I think that it's a fairly inconsequential story by design. The gameplay does not hold up to like Arkham Knight or Arkham City, but again, that's sort of by design. This is a handheld spin-off. They're trying to adapt it for a much smaller player experience, and so I obviously don't hold it to the standards of the other games. The one thing that I feel that this game did really well is it lets us see Batman and Catwoman really interact, which isn't something that we really get to see much in the other games. We get traces of it in Arkham Knight, we see hints of it in Arkham City, but to see Batman really working with Catwoman during one of his nights at Blackgate was really cool to see, and I really appreciated that we got a game to flesh it out, even if it was just a handheld spin-off game. So then we get Batgirl, A Matter of Family, which was another Arkham episode from Arkham Knight. In this one, we get a good 40 minutes of playing as Batgirl, 40 to 60 minutes, depending on how long it takes you to play through. She gets to dual play with Robin, and it's a story about her rescuing her father, Commissioner Gordon, from Joker and Harley Quinn, which I really had a lot of fun with. But again, it's a fairly inconsequential story. There really isn't much to it. They could have leaned more into a lot of the Killing Joke elements, but they chose not to. And this was developed by Warner Brothers Games Montreal, so it has a bit of a different vibe than the Rocksteady games, which I actually appreciated. I think that it's a fun change of pace from the other Arkham Knight content, which, you know, I love Arkham Knight as well, but to just see something that felt a little bit different was a breath of fresh air, just because it is the biggest Arkham game. And so to get a different developer's take on this gameplay loop was really cool. Again, I just wish that there had been a bit more to the story, but getting to play as Batgirl was a highlight for sure. Moving on, I have Harley Quinn's Revenge. Similarly to the Batgirl DLC, I just didn't feel that there was quite enough to this to really warrant it being higher on the list. I do like Harley Quinn's Revenge, but it does feel a bit short. I think that it is more compelling than any of the Arkham episodes of Arkham Knight, but with that being said, it never reaches the heights of Arkham City, which is the game that this DLC is attached to. It was cool getting to play as Robin here again as well, and getting to team up with Batman and rescue him from Harley Quinn. It was interesting to see Harley in mourning after the death of the Joker in Arkham City. Spoilers, of course, if you haven't played that game. It came out over a decade ago, so, you know, sorry, but I'm really not. You should have played it by now. And especially if you're watching a list where I'm ranking the entire series, I'm assuming you've played it by now. Anyway, I shouldn't have even gone off on that tangent, but I did. Okay. Arkham Origins, the base game, is next on this ranking. Arkham Origins, I really think is interesting because it has a very different feel than the rest of the Arkham series, which in many ways is a breath of fresh air. I think that this feels the most realistic in some ways. It feels the most Nolan-esque to me. So if you really like the Dark Knight trilogy, I think Arkham Origins is the way to go. I love getting to play as Batman in his early years, in his younger years, getting to see those first encounters with villains. I think that where this game suffers is more in the gameplay loop because, again, that story is really compelling. It has some fantastic characterization. I know a lot of people consider this to have the best story out of any Arkham game. For me personally, I feel that there's a lot of storytelling that Rocksteady did that goes overlooked, but that's another video for another day. Ultimately, Warner Brothers Games Montreal did a great job, again, with Batman and building up his relationship to the villains. They did a great job of setting up the stage for the future Arkham games. But I think that having the gameplay just be copied and pasted from Arkham City didn't really do it any favors. Having half of the map be copy and pasted from Arkham City also didn't really do it any favors. So while I did find this game compelling and really good, it doesn't rank higher because it doesn't really do anything that the other games that are higher on this list didn't. But rest assured that I really like all the Arkham games, like, a lot. Like, they're all in my top 20 games of all time. I think they're all fantastic. So now with only a few entries on this list remaining, let's dive into Arkham Knight. Batman Arkham Knight. Ugh, this game, I love it, but it's also very disappointing to me because it didn't hit all the beats that I really felt that it needed to. This was advertised heavily as the finale to the Batman Arkham series, but all of those plot points that I really wanted to see resolved felt like they were just swept under the rug. A new story was thrown together with new characters that we hadn't interacted with yet, and it felt underwhelming. It felt like there was a big plot twist that they thought was really clever that just was predictable and, again, didn't really service the story or the universe. And I really wish that they would have leaned into Hush and Azrael and some of those other characters. So from a storytelling perspective, I felt Arkham Knight was the weakest. and I was left fairly disappointed by it. But with that being said, it has by far the greatest graphics and gameplay out of any Arkham game. It really does make you feel like Batman, and so I do find myself returning to this game all the time, and the story has many admirable moments and really compelling ideas that are strung together by inconsistent execution. But I'm really excited to see what the team does with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League going forward. And I want to emphasize that I don't think that the story of Arkham Knight is bad. I just found it disappointing. And again, underwhelming is probably the word that I would use to describe a lot of its treatment of characters, again, such as Hush and Azrael and some of those other heavy hitters like Two-Face and Penguin. Two-Face was marketed all over the place in Arkham Knight, but he barely had any screen time in the game. He was in a side mission that you could take him out with one hit in. So really, it's just that the story didn't focus on what I wanted it to, but that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it underwhelming to me personally. So next, I actually have Cold Cold Heart from Warner Brothers Games Montreal, which was the DLC for Arkham Origins. I know that this is a short DLC, so I'm sure that there are going to be people who put me on blast for putting this higher than Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight, but I feel that this is the best. This is the S-tier content that was developed by Warner Brothers Games Montreal. This was where they really figured out the Arkham formula and really got themselves going in a solid direction. Their treatment of Batman and Mr. Freeze in this was perfect. This feels like a perfect adaptation of Heart of Ice, and in my opinion, it even improves. It brings it to a darker, more mature level, and of course, getting to play through it with the Arkham formula adds a lot of really fun gameplay as well. The boss battle at the end with Mr. Freeze feels very earned, very interesting, compelling. You care about Mr. Freeze at this point, and so it's a hard boss fight to get through in some ways because you want to defeat him, but you also want him to be able to save his wife, and you really are pissed at Ferris Boyle, the antagonist of this DLC, and you kind of don't mind the idea of Mr. Freeze getting full-on revenge, and so it almost hurts as Batman to have to stop him. So I felt that this was where they really helped the player get invested in Batman's story and made you, again, feel like Batman from a narrative perspective in terms of how he felt about Mr. Freeze and Ferris Boyle. It was deeply compelling. Yes, it was fairly brief, but I do think that it's the longest out of the story DLCs for the Arkham games, and it really works. I think that there's very little to complain about with this DLC, so if you never got a chance to try this one out, definitely invest a little bit of time on your PC or Xbox One to play it, because I think it's very worth it. And now we're down to the last two. That's right, we've gotten through all the Arkham content except for two more things, and coming in at number 2 is going to be Arkham Asylum. Arkham Asylum just turned 13 years old, which is weird to me, and it's also insane how well this game holds up. And even though I definitely wouldn't mind a from the ground up remake for the PS5 just to experience this game's environment in full current generation glory, I'm still happy with how this game has aged. The atmosphere and the map is fantastic. It feels like peak Batman setting, and I feel that Rocksteady really showed the world how great a Batman game could be. I also feel that the story and characterization is highly underrated in this game, but I feel that that's another story for another time. I really love what they did with Batman and Joker, and I love the character designs, I love the voice actors. Again, the world and the setting and ambience and music is just flawless here. This is amazing Batman content, and it's all so fast-paced and so compelling. The final boss battle is disappointing, but what can you really complain about when the rest of the game is so perfect? And finally, at number 1, of course, we have Arkham City. I don't think that that will come as a surprise because Arkham City is often ranked as the highest Batman Arkham piece of content, but I think that that is for very good reason. Arkham City honestly feels as good as some of the best Batman graphic novels ever written. The characterization, again, is fantastic. The death of the Joker is handled so well, and this feels like a monumental, very pivotal piece of Batman lore. What they did with Hugo Strange and Ra's al Ghul, how they really tied the Batman mythology together in a perfect package with a wonderful map, wonderful gameplay. It feels so well balanced, and overall, it just evens out in being the greatest Batman experience out of the Arkham series. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Leave your rankings as well. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And again, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a great time ranking these, and we'll see you guys in the next one.